Welcome back.
What do you mean? Start the
Was that too
intro,
much
bro.
energy?
What are you
Was that too much
doing?
energy? Was that too much energy? Was that too like
Nah, I think you needed just a tad bit more energy, just
a
like
bit more energy?
yeah.
Welcome. No, I'm joking. No.
No,
Okay.
you're almost there. You were
No.
almost there.
See, I'm shy. I can't do that. I'm shy.
Unorthodox reactions and unorthodox intro.
Unorthodox
Welcome back,
intro,
guys, to another
Another
unorthodox
unorthodox
reaction.
reactions.
How you guys doing today? We hope you're doing good.
Exactly.
We are back with more internet historian.
Hope you didn't have to wait too long and you didn't feel a type of way about that.
I hope you're one of the lucky ones that watched it on the day after this one came out and you get to watch both of them back to back.
Exactly. If not, unlucky lad.
Anyway, let's not waste too much of your time without further ado.
Let's get right into it.
Word spread about Floyd. Miller's reporting had been picked up by the AP Newswire, and they distributed it amongst their hundreds of partnered newspapers. For Miller, it would be the biggest moment of his career. But he didn't stop to pay it mind. He spent the day hatching a rescue plan. Miller descended into the cave and set to work. When he entered, he found that the team before him had strung light bulbs all through the cavern, leading all the way down to Floyd. Very handy. A bulb was also put around Floyd's neck to keep him warm and make sure that he was never again left in the dark. Miller popped down to Floyd.
Smart.
Considerate.
Floyd, fancy seeing you here, buddy.
Really?
Reusing that syrup tin, he started offloading gravel into buckets. Those buckets were then passed up and down the cavern. And so it went on for the next 2 hours. Miller stopped for a break. He took some bread, milk, and whiskey, and sharing it with Floyd, they started to get to talking. Floyd had been in that cave for over 100 hours.
That's crazy.
And seeing everyone working together, Floyd was overcome with a sense of hope and relief. And so he began spilling his heart out to Miller. Here is what he is quoted in the newspaper.
I believed I would go to heaven. I can feel that I'm to be taken out alive and with both my feet. I kept thinking, what would happen if the rock above me would fall? It caused me to shudder. I kept thinking to drive my mind to something else, but it wasn't much use. I couldn't do much to help those who came to help me, but I knew that a lot of people were willing to do all in their power. It gave me courage. Tuesday morning, I thought to myself, 4 days down here, and no nearer freedom than I was on the first day. How will it end? Will I get out? I couldn't think of it. I have faced death before. It doesn't frighten me, but it is so long. Tell them I am not going to give up. Tell them I'm going to fight and be patient and never forget them.
I respect it.
Meanwhile, Floyd's story
Great work,
kept
Floyd.
going. Pedestrians would gather around corner store windows to read the latest bulletins. The press began using giant typefaces, commonly only reserved for declarations of war. Churches in all of the nearby counties were holding services for Floyd. Theaters even interrupted their shows to update the audience. Now, at the time, President Coolidge was in charge, and his Secretary of Commerce was a geologist, Herbert Hoover. Now, Mr. Hoover followed the story very closely, and so it was likely that the president did too. Even Congress paused session to ask about the latest news from Sand Cave. By the end, the Floyd Collins incident would explode into the third largest non-political story between World War I and World War II. All of this excitement brought an inundation of people to Cave City. Old population, 690. Yawn. New population, 10,000.
That's
Hotels
crazy.
ran out of food. Residents turned their homes into makeshift hotels, charging sizable premiums to let people nap in their bathtubs. The banks quickly ran out of on-hand cash, and 4,500 automobiles impatiently sat backed up for 2 miles from 20 different states to drive onto the Collins farm and turn their pristine green pastures into swampy parking lots.
I don't understand why though.
There's Miller trying to
Because of the audience. The attraction.
Right, a little bit
just drew so much.
What attraction?
Miller, some remaining rubble, rock.
I don't know, man.
Anyone
It's just
to lift
something
the
that's
rock
never
by
happened
hand
before.
would be impossible because Floyd's body obstructs the hole. Miller grabs a crowbar and shoves it through the gap. Now he's going to lever it off Floyd's foot. Cool. The crowbar is now wedged against the rock. Next, he takes a jack. He positions it on top of the crowbar so that it will be forced against the ceiling. However,
Is that smart?
problem, that jack is too big. It doesn't fit. Miller yells up the tunnel for a smaller one, but this took some time. And when it arrived, too small, won't reach the ceiling. But instead of sending for another one, Miller takes 2 blocks of wood and bolsters them underneath the crowbar. Right, so the crowbar now sits higher, it fulcrums against the blocks, and the jack is sitting on top. All
He's
Miller
trying
has
a
to
lot.
do is expand the jack, which he will do using this spanner, holding it at the very tips of his fingers.
Wait,
Sounds
do you
easy.
know what I think is going to
It's
happen?
not. But
Pause
that's
it.
the plan. Let's get him.
I think as he pushes the rock up, it's going to create another hole, which will allow.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like because that's what he did at first, where he pushed up towards the roof. That's
Yeah,
what caused all this.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's probably not gonna turn out a good story. I mean, considering there's a good half an hour left,
Yeah.
I don't think he's
not.
gonna get out anytime soon.
I think Floyd is dead.
We'll see.
Get him out of there. He turned the wrench. The jack expanded, and the crowbar took strain. The whole thing slid apart with a pang. Floyd
Knew
wasn't
it.
hurt, but Miller was contorting and exerting his whole body from back to fingertip. They tried again. Same result. Miller tried a new angle. Maybe this time. The jack pressed. The tension increased. And this time, the rock
block of wood.
moved. It
Ooh.
fucking moved. With each turn, the stone shifted a little more.
Promising.
Miller's hands shook with adrenaline.
Come
His
on,
face
Miller,
and
you got
body
this.
dripping with sweat.
You got this.
One of the blocks slipped, and the wooden tower went sideways.
Just get another one,
Painfully
please.
slammed back down on Colin's foot.
Get it next time, Miller. Try again.
Miller did. Again and again, adding blocks.
Why doesn't
taking
he,
them
as
away.
soon as
New crowbar position?
like it
change
lifts a
the
little
jack
bit,
position.
move your
Yep.
foot?
No, that's what he hasn't moved it enough for him to be able to move his foot.
Oh, maybe yeah, true.
Like,
makes
he's
sense,
only
yeah.
moved it like a few inches, and then it'll like slide off and like slam
Yeah.
it down.
Yeah.
But I'm like, can he just send for another sized wrench? Like, what is it called? Another sized jack while he's doing this, just in case. Like,
Yeah,
it would
what-
have speed up the whole thing.
What, a bigger one?
Like, smaller than the first one, bigger than the second one.
You're
So,
joking.
medium sized one, I guess.
I don't know if
Freaking
that's gonna work.
Goldilocks out here.
Every angle, all while Floyd was there, cheering him on.
Yay.
Oh
For the
my
next 4
god.
hours he tried. No progress. Miller was exhausted. He couldn't do this on his own,
Understandably.
but he was the only one slim enough to get in through the gap. The group decided to concede for now and return to the
Yeah,
surface.
you in this
They
round.
would take
What happened to the
just a
other guy
small
who
break,
was taking
but
the
it looked
things
to
off?
everyone like there was a clear way.
What other guy?
The guy who was taking the small rocks off. What happened to him?
Yeah, he was there too, but he couldn't fit.
No. Why
I'm
did
assuming.
he stop that? Why did he
Yeah,
stop
because
doing that?
they've moved the. Didn't you hear it? Was you even listening?
Yeah, I
they've,
was.
they've moved enough of the rocks out the way to get him out. So now all they need to do is lift the one that
Okay.
has his foot stuck, so that he can move. Like, he can wiggle back now. He just needs to get his foot unstuck, and then he can like move him out of the cave.
Okay, makes sense.
To get this man out. So Miller and Burden crawl back through
It's
the
the
mud
finish
and the
line.
winds of the cave. As they made their way through, the cave was visibly sagging. The ceiling seemed lower. Parts were harder to navigate than before, especially now with their bruised and purple hands. But they made it outside to the fresh, early morning air. And here is where they're greeted with a new sight. Dozens of soldiers. The National
Okay.
Guard had arrived. In addition to the National Guard, a new figure
The
was
president.
joining the story, Henry Carmichael. Now, Carmichael was the general superintendent of the Kentucky Rock Asphalt Company. He had been on site since Tuesday, and he was appalled at how primitive the rescue attempts had been. Shortly after Miller and co. had exited, Carmichael sent 2 men into Sand Cave to assess the structure's stability. They soon came back with a report. It was not good. Near the final squeeze, large cracks had formed. The ceiling was beginning to droop.
Oh,
Right, so
but
the
they're
following is
lucky
a
that he came
recounting of
along.
events from one of Carmichael's men, Casey Jones. Casey and another worker spent about an hour in the cave, surveying its condition, looking at the boards, the ceiling, the stability of the walls. He continued deeper towards Floyd. He was fighting against his nerves. The shifting of the rock pinged his every instinct to flee. But he heard Collins moaning ahead, so he pushed himself on. He managed to make it through the squeeze, and he arrived at the 10-foot pit. Seeing Floyd trapped, he tried to ignore the pebbles that were tumbling behind him.
Please, come down.
It's like, I won't buy it.
But I will when I get back.
Behind Casey, his partner is begging to leave. Below Casey, Collins is pleading for help.
Please.
Shut up, Collins. Stop being so selfish.
Okay.
Casey
Yeah,
slid
but
headfirst into the pit and
that's-
hastily laid Floyd some coffee. Floyd rejected it.
You were saying?
No, I was gonna say the guy looks like a British guy.
I don't really think it matters what they. It's just,
I know. He's just using it.
And
I
in
don't
that
think it
moment,
needs to be
Casey
that
realized
friggin'
that this was not
accurate.
a
This
plea
isn't a
for
movie.
sustenance. Floyd knew that a cave-in was inevitable. Scared and approaching his 5th day trapped, he was completely at his wit's end.
5
He knew he
days,
was
about to be
almost
there.
a
trapped in
week.
that cave,
Facts.
and he didn't want to be trapped alone.
You about to miss happy hour again.
Dude's done.
Please, don't leave.
Casey looked into Colin's eyes,
Stop guilt
set
tripping
the
him.
coffee down, and pulled himself out of the pit. He wiggled underneath the sagging ceiling and crawled towards the turnaround room as fast as his limbs could scramble against the cave walls. He looked back to see the passage closing like a maw.
It's going
Reflections
down.
from the bulb shining around Floyd's neck were no longer visible.
Oh
Instead,
no.
just sobs could be heard, muffled.
And he
from
was
behind the
almost
rocks.
out too.
But they have to get him out because either dead or alive,
Confident
his
that
family's gonna want the body.
Yeah, true. But I think he would prefer to be alive when he's out.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying they're gonna go back there to get him out. So I think he might be alive.
I don't think he's like the problem is that them going back. I think the problem is them going back before he dies.
Yeah, I know.
Because remember, he's still like in the water, so he's still suffering from like hypothermia, I think. So he
Yeah,
can still
yeah.
potentially like freeze to death.
He's got coffee there, so just drink some coffee.
He can't drink it on his own. He can't move his arms.
Is he pissing himself then? And like,
Pretty much, yeah.
I play.
today would be the day that they saved Floyd. They had some new equipment too. Some wire to wrap around the wooden blocks to prevent them from
That
slipping.
cave must smell
And they
like
changed their mind about that
like
acetylene
you can't
torch.
even
They'll use
imagine.
it to burn away 2 rocks that had previously blocked their way. But when
Wait,
Miller
they can
got
do
to
that?
the turnaround room, all of that optimism left him.
Yeah, it's full. It's
The entrance
collapsed.
to the squeeze was now just a pile of debris. Miller froze, staring at it for a long while. Then he sighed and did the only thing he could think,
Start
attempt to
digging.
move some of the stones. But each adjustment led to more rocks just tumbling down and landing in that space. He persisted
Freaking
until
out.
crash. A large chunk of clay landed onto his feet.
Ah, he's out of
Recognizing the
commission.
danger, Miller returned to the surface. 15 minutes later, he emerged from the cave with a bloodied up nose and bruises down his back and shoulders. Burden caught sight and races over.
Honestly, though, I think at this point I can see why people are invested. Imagine
Yeah.
like listening to this live on the radio updates.
That's what I'm saying,
This
bro.
will feel like a legit movie. 'Cause
Exactly,
it's like,
and you want to see what
um,
happens.
it's gonna be like, oh, we've got news, folks. It appears that they've cleared all the debris, and all they have to do now is move a large rock. And then the next hour is like, oh, it seems like the National Guard are now on site, and it appears that they've surveyed and the rocks and the structure is weak. Oh, we just got news, the cave collapsed. So now,
Exactly. Exactly, bro. That's
bro,
exactly what
I'd
they're
be on
doing.
the edge of my seat. Oh
Exactly.
my god,
And it's not scripted, so no one knows the ending.
right? And it's literally it keeps coming up with twists and turns. It's not like a straightforward rescue of, oh, we've got news there's a guy in the cave, and then like 2 days later, they're like, oh, so yeah, the guy got rescued and is out now.
Yeah, he's out the cave.
It just keeps tumbling and it's like constant.
Constant.
It's
Constantly
crazy.
something coming up. That's lit.
And I think I can understand why like people kept coming in now, because obviously it's one thing to get the news on the radio, but then if you're there, you can get the news live, like as
it's another thing to see it. Yeah.
So for example, like seeing his brother come out or with a bloody nose, if you're there, you can see it versus like listening to it on the radio is different.
You know the background he's using is Peaky Blinders.
Oh, I just noticed that.
Yeah, same. It's Peaky Blinders.
That's hilarious.
Absolutely hilarious. I guess it's around the same time, so it makes
Miller
sense.
just said, for God's sake, just don't let Homer or anyone else back in there. Now, he didn't actually need to worry about Homer going back in there because he was sidelined with illness. But he did, however, need to worry about Gerald because he was furious. Gerald had warned everyone that putting dozens of people in Sand Cave would cause a collapse. It certainly did. The rest of that day would be wasted as men threw blame around and screamed at each other about how to handle the cave-in. And Floyd spent the rest of that day alone.
That must be, and at least he's not in the dark.
Same thing, bro.
The surveyors continued checking the cave throughout the day. By the evening, Carmichael had ordered everyone to an assembly. He was going to try one last daring rescue. He boldly announced his plan and an ultimatum.
Listen up. There's death down there. The walls and ceilings are crumbling. Unless you're determined to take the biggest chance you ever took in your life, tell me now and stay outside.
Next, they told all the Gawkers to get the fuck out of the cave, clear off. And over the next 8 hours, Gerald would enter and leave Sand Cave at least 5 times, chipping away at that pile of debris. In the woods, men sawed trees and chopped logs to shore up the
trying to secure the walls.
Underground, the crew reinforced cracks and wobbling boulders with fresh strips of wood. Gerald assessed that about 4 barrels of rocks would need to be moved, and piece by piece, they made that happen. Steadily, they managed to move enough rock to allow Gerald to get within earshot of Floyd.
Hey, hello, I need food.
Bad news. We can't reach you, but hold on, we're coming.
Stone by stone, they continued. After a few hours, the light of the bulb around Floyd's neck was peeking through. A couple more hours,
almost there.
Enough room for Gerald to squeeze through.
Okay, that's enough. Floyd, I'm going for now, but when I get back, I'm gonna get you out of there.
Exhausted but still determined, Gerald crawled back up the cave and marched to the men huddling outside.
Gather the equipment, and in an hour's time, it's gonna be me and Floyd coming out of that cave.
Amen.
It's a bold statement.
Yeah.
Gerald entered Sand Cave for his final time. The walls had been reinforced.
All right, here we go.
But mud and water was accumulating everywhere. He waded through it and pressed on past the danger of the sagging ceiling. With determination on his face and a grease gun clutched in his right hand, he scrambled towards Floyd. But before the final squeeze, he stopped.
It's a big
It was
breath.
all gone. The cave ceiling had crumbled once again. Gerald stared motionlessly at the pile. Then he began to yell.
Floyd!
A rock disconnected from the ceiling and tumbled onto Gerald's head. Luckily, just a small one. He rubbed his scalp and called out again.
I thought it was going to say it knocked him out.
This time, a moan. It rumbled from the other side.
I thought he
Fearing
was going
that
to say
his
it
friend
knocked him
was
out
slipping
too.
out of
Sorry.
consciousness,
Yeah.
Gerald willed himself against the cave.
And then everyone
launching
just
the
thought he
debris
was there trying to
behind
help
with
him.
force. He ignored the pain from being struck
And then
on
they
the
both
head
died.
and clawed at the stone pile.
Facts.
He carried on this way for several minutes until a sharp, heavy rock dropped from the ceiling and landed squarely on his back. No more than 15 minutes later, Gerald returned to the surface. Defeated.
The cave claimed another victim.
Only after the cave-ins did they start to think about all of the things that they could have done.
Yeah, they should have
Why
secured the
did we rip
cave
a portable
first.
telephone line? That would have been incredibly simple here in 1925. Yeah, why have we been running in and out to deliver updates?
Why didn't we give him an AM radio? He could have had something to listen to and receive messages of support from the public.
Wait, why don't we rig up a tarpaulin so we could lift
Shoulda,
his
woulda,
torso
coulda,
up so he
bro.
wouldn't be slowly dying of exposure? Oh God, why didn't we run a feeding tube? That's also a technology we have in 1925.
All too late. Now what? The one route to get to Floyd
They all panicked.
is closed forever. That meant two options.
Leave
Number
him to
one,
die.
capitulation. Surrender him to the cave.
And
number
blow
two.
up the cave.
Dig down from directly above Floyd. Now, the prospect of digging from above seemed almost fanciful. At least, it did in the beginning. But luckily, they had some help. Owing to Miller's reporting, Floyd had become practically the most famous person in the country. The rescue had become a high priority for the governor of Kentucky. Lieutenant General Denhart
Why?
enters the scene. He's been updated on the situation, and following shortly behind him is a small army
He
of
murdered his
miners
girlfriend.
and engineers. He declared to the despondent crowd, "Gentlemen, I am here on behalf of the governor. The purse strings of Kentucky are open. Take this blank check and bring that man out alive."
That's okay. It's a bit
Floyd
forward.
in that cold, wet confine could not have imagined the scale of the operation that was going on 55 feet above him. Authorities assumed control of Colin's rescue. Denhart
How is he
gave
still alive?
Henry
He hasn't
Carmichael
eaten.
the lead to dig, and Carmichael raced to get
No,
to
I
work.
think he's back. It's pretty much back to the 2 days thing. Because if you remember, I think he just before they left, before the cave in,
Yeah.
because you know the two guys that came to surveil the rock structure.
Yeah.
I think one of them shared a sandwich with him and gave him coffee before they left,
Oh yeah, true.
and that was on Wednesday, I think.
Or Tuesday.
Tuesday or Wednesday, yeah.
He enlisted his employees, his fleet of expensive high-tech machinery. Professional groups were brought in from all across the state. Local townspeople were mostly excluded, and for the first time since Collins had been trapped, work was now about to go ahead in a systematic manner. Everyone knew the plan, everyone had something to do, and everyone was working fast. But just as hopes were rising, they were once again dashed against the rocks.
Nah.
They had all of this state-of-the-art machinery shipped in and assembled by the engineers and rearing to go, and it was all worthless. See, the problem is the cave drew air into it. These diesel-powered engines pumped out enormous volumes of choking exhaust.
Yeah, they're gonna kill
Within a
him.
day's operation, the cave would be filled with carbon monoxide, and
Yeah.
Floyd would be dead from asphyxiation. Just as quickly as
I like the
solutions would
little-
arise, the cave would parry them away. It refused to let this man go. So engineers and miners had wasted
Bro,
hours
that cave was
assembling
high risk,
everything,
high reward.
only to realize that they had to pack it all up and cart it away. Because the digging of a
Manual.
55-foot shaft would be done
Manual.
with picks and shovels.
That's crazy.
Peak, bro.
Carmichael didn't know much about caves, but he knew a lot about quarrying, and he estimated that his team of 75 volunteers could dig and dredge at a rate of 2 feet per hour.
That's done.
If they worked around the clock, they would be digging directly into the spot where Floyd lays within 30 hours.
That's.
Now, is it possible
I don't
that
think he
Floyd
has
could
that
survive
long.
for another 30 hours?
Yeah, it's possible.
Absolutely. Let's go. The first ton was moved, and at first it was easy work. Just dirt.
Yeah,
and
so
clay.
it's easy to start.
Carmichael understood well that this was a race against time, so he watched the men closely, and if they seemed to be slowing down, even a little, they would be yanked out and immediately a new
Replaced.
worker subbed in. Nonetheless, the pace slowed. By 10 feet, the shaft narrowed greatly, which meant that only 2 men could work at a time.
What?
At 15 feet, they hit boulders. Pickaxes went in, and a system of pulleys and buckets had to be used to cart the rock out. Tracks were even laid to ferry the refuse to a dump site.
The thing is, if they had started this
Time
earlier,
passed.
yeah,
Hours
Yeah, but I think earlier obviously before the cave caved in, they figured they could just save him without that. Because
yeah,
obviously
yeah,
this is like a lot of, and also earlier I would assume like the news hasn't gotten as big as it did now.
yeah,
So
true,
because obviously there's a lot of manpower that it takes to be able to do this.
true.
passed. Night went to day. The day was hot. This was yet another problem, because it's early February, there's tons of ice still in the ground, and its exposure to the fresh midday sun meant that the walls of the
Oh, it's
shaft
gonna
were
melt.
softening and the ground becoming
Cave's
solid.
gonna fill with
The
more
pace
water.
of digging slowed. It was now only half a foot per hour. Most anyone could do was watch helplessly on the sidelines.
So what's that, an extra 10 hours?
Interestingly, though, there were a lot of people on the sidelines.
Oh, they can help
Floyd
too.
believed that the space above him had turned into a literal carnival
It's half
in
a
his
day.
honor. Vendors showed up to sell hamburgers, hot dogs, and souvenirs. Families sprawled out over blankets to
Bro,
listen to hymns
these
from
people
local
made a
church
day
groups.
out of it.
The local mountebanks sold moonshine and miracle cures. There was even a bloody juggler. And Old Man Lee was there, walking around, shaking his
Oh
jar
wow, this
and soliciting
guy.
donations.
He's
But
probably just
where
gonna
were
spend it
Homer
on
and
alcohol
Bert and Miller
afterwards.
during
You would think this was a festival.
Okay, let's back up a bit.
Right?
People did not properly understand exactly how Floyd was trapped. The
See,
news didn't help much either.
See, I feel
the
like
obvious
this
questions-
is where social media would have came in handy if it was around at this time. Because you know
Why?
there would have been like one of those YouTubers that'd be able to like break it down for people in a way where they'd be able to understand
oh, yeah,
just
yeah,
how
yeah,
dangerous it is for the way he's stuck
yeah.
and how wide the rescue is so difficult.
started to arise.
Like,
Why hasn't he been rescued yet? Just clear some
like
gravel off the
internet
board, right?
historians
How is
don't
this
throw
so
us down.
hard? Motive was attributed.
I heard they didn't even want to have him rescued at all. I heard that they're doing all of this for publicity.
And Lee's activity of soliciting donations,
Yeah, that doesn't
remember,
help,
from
does it?
before, further inflamed rumors.
I bet Floyd isn't even trapped in there.
These were all real rumors, and they got worse.
You know what? I've heard he comes out at night, and then he just goes back in the morning.
Other rumors
That's
included
crazy.
I heard that after Floyd went into the cave, someone murdered him.
Others said
I think they're withholding food and water from him, so he dies.
What?
This whole thing is a fraud.
Yeah,
as time
people
went
be
on, it was
rumoring
harder
like
and harder to
crazy in
ignore
them
the hoax
days.
claims. Then
Fact.
people started to form
Like, bro,
righteous
go look
mobs,
for
claiming
yourself.
the whole thing was a fraud, and they started to get nasty. In fact, 2 people even went to the telegraph office and pretended to be Floyd sending telegrams to his mother. Here's what it said. Quote, "Please contradict statements that I am buried alive in Sand Cave. Stop. Tell mother I am all right. Stop.
What?
Am coming home. Stop. Floyd Collins." Naturally, the AP published these telegrams unquestioningly, and now word is out to the press that he isn't actually in the cave after all. That made the authorities look foolish, and it could not go on. So, a hasty court-martial was arranged, and Homer, Miller, and Gerald were summoned. They hold one session on Monday and another on Tuesday. Lee and everyone else is cleared of charges, a retraction is written, and things carry on.
Lol, Colin wasn't faking it.
He's
Generators
dead,
rumbled.
bro.
Pumps churned out water.
Nice, still
Men
alive.
continued working
Nah,
in
he's dead,
shifts
bro.
and carrying away the earth. Here they are with strips of lumber to shore up the walls. They were only 25 feet down. The pace had slowed to 4 inches per hour.
Oh god.
In their desperation, they resorted to dynamite. But this did
No.
little to the boulders. Despite all these bleak circumstances, people's spirits were high because everyone was keen for their turn to dig. And because they had one more thing to latch onto. He is probably still alive.
Do
Now,
you
how do they
know?
know that?
Right?
Okay, so remember that light bulb around Floyd's neck? Well, it's powered by a simple copper wire. Bare copper wire is subject to very minute fluctuations in resistance. So, An
Got you.
engineer rigs up a radio amplifier to this wire to read the current and see those small fluctuations.
So when there stops being small fluctuations, it
were.
means you stop moving.
About 20 per minute, the rate of steady breathing. As his chest expands and contracts, they can read it from this device. And so they kept going.
Wouldn't it be funny if he was dead? It was just
And going.
something
With like
else.
2 feet to go.
Yeah.
30 hours was the original estimate. Now 144 hours had come and gone, and they were only at 44 feet.
Oh
Then
my
rain
god. He's
Rain
almost
mixed
in there
with
for
dirt
2
to
weeks
make
now.
mud, much of which then froze to make ice.
He's
Which
gonna miss
expanded
3
and
happy
damaged the
hours.
integrity of the shaft walls. Slowing
Dude, stop
down with
thinking
every
about
hour,
happy hour.
they continued.
That's how I
Decent
measured the
Christmas.
time.
Many more hours passed, and they were getting close. But it was now 15 days since
Saturday.
Floyd was first stuck in that cave, and people had mostly lost hope. That excitement in the newspapers was
Yeah,
tempering
people
down.
be
Visitors
friggin'
began clearing out from
flippant
Cave
as
City.
hell.
Many still held on to hope, but their final lifeline, that light bulb, had burnt out.
Stopped.
And it wasn't possible to do any more readings on the radio amplifier without it. No one knew if Floyd was still alive.
R.I.P. Floyd, man.
Another 51 hours would pass before
Bro, if he's still alive after
finally
this,
they
this would be
reached
so
a
crazy.
60-foot depth.
I'm in. Chisel.
A chisel is
You know what would be amazingly funny?
What?
Well, not funny, but unfortunate, but also funny with time, would be if they got to that far down and then realized, oh, we were like a couple feet off, so we're not even in the right place.
Like, not
handed
even a
down.
couple, like
At
10 feet off
1:30
or something.
Yeah, like
on Monday,
a
That's a lot.
little way
February
off.
16th. Sand Cave would open once again. For 17 days, Floyd had been trapped underground, stuck in the same position. 4 days without heat or light. 12 without food or water.
Dead.
Maybe the dripping of the cave water had provided him with some sustenance? There are stories of people surviving harsher extremes. Rescuers frantically tugged at rocks to widen the hole. Everybody stood by, absolutely silent.
Isn't that the guy that had his
peering
back broken?
into that hole.
Pause.
No, he wasn't back broken. It
Ed
was just
flashed his light into the gap,
the
then
rock landed
eased
on his back,
himself in.
and it hurt.
Brenner aimed his light around the room.
Oh, wait, I didn't hear what he said.
Hole.
Who,
Ed
me
flashed his
or
light into the gap,
just
then eased himself
video?
in. Brenner aimed his light around the room, and then, finally, at Floyd. The first thing he saw was a golden shimmer. It was not the light bulb. It was the reflection of Floyd's tooth. His mouth hung open. He was dead.
Told
Brenner
you.
was helped out of the cave, and he delivered the news.
Dead.
A coroner would later state that Floyd succumbed to exposure, and that they had missed him by just 3 days.
Dang.
About the same time
That's not.
that the light bulb had gone out.
That's not just 3 days.
So wait, exposure to what?
The cold, I think.
But what would they do now with the body? The shaft walls were ready to fall inwards, and risking lives to remove a corpse was seen as just irresponsible.
No, don't do
So the following
salmonella.
morning, officials made a decision. Floyd would be entombed where he lay. The
Why?
cave would keep
Because it's too hard
its
to get him
victim.
out.
No, they already got him out.
No, they
Now,
didn't.
this did not sit well with the family.
Hold on.
Inwards, and
No, they
risking
did.
lives to remove.
Because remember, he said
No,
that they did the autopsy on him to say that they missed him by 3 days.
Yeah, but he just said that. Look, play it. Go back a bit. Play it.
Let's go back to before, right here.
Okay.
Dead.
A coroner would later state that Floyd succumbed to
See?
exposure, and that
No.
they had missed him.
I
by
think he
just
kind of
3
needed the body to
days.
be able to make this
About
No,
the
watch,
same
watch,
time
assessment.
that the light bulb had gone out. But what would they do now with the body? The shaft walls were ready to fall inwards, and risking lives to remove a corpse was seen as just irresponsible.
Got you. Okay.
So the following morning, officials made a decision. Floyd would be entombed where he lay. The cave would keep its victim. Now, this did not sit
Did I
well
fill
with the
the hole
family,
in?
but what could they do? The next day, they planned
No.
a funeral. The town emptied of people, and the shaft with Floyd at the bottom was refilled with soil. But that's not quite the end of the story. But if you hung on for this long, keep holding on, because things are going to continue to get interesting. But first, let me do a wrap-up of where everyone is and all that stuff. Context. The Collins family already had financial hardship. Locals saw Old Man Lee scouring the rescue site for glass bottles. But the owner of the land, B. Doyle, and supposed friend of Floyd, was wholly unsympathetic. He erected a sign on the highway which
Oh, he's
said,
gonna
200 yards away, the body of Floyd
He's
Collins
gonna use it
is
as a tourist
imprisoned
attraction.
in Sand Cave. Then
It's
he began
friggin-
charging tourists 50 cents apiece for the opportunity to gander into the hole. It's 100 years later, B's dead. Let's call it even. Also, remember those claims of Kentucky being an open purse? Well, the state reneged on the deal. They refused to pay many of the rescuers,
What,
and most of them
really?
went home without any compensation. Some of them did make
'Cause
some
he's
money
dead.
out of the situation, though. They
Yeah,
lucked
but
into vaudeville
still.
gigs and roamed the country, giving
So
their
this is why you should cash
first-person
the
account.
blank check before you start the
Miller,
work.
however, received an astonishing offer, a $50,000 contract from the Chautauqua Lecture Circuit, equivalent to the better part of $1 million in
Oh,
today's money.
well, for the
He declined.
story.
He continued to work at the Louisville Courier-Journal. The following year, his coverage of Floyd's story earned him the Pulitzer Prize. Now, the brother, Homer,
I think that's
he
a
needed money and he
award for
agreed to do
journalism.
that vaudeville circuit. He stood on stage and regaled the audience about tales of his brother, their childhood, and the tragedy. But Homer made it known why he was up here on stage trying to get money. He had a mission.
I kept thinking of
What,
Floyd
he wants to get
lying
the
in
body
the
back?
mud
It is
where he had
Samito.
suffered beyond our power
Yeah,
to
it's
imagine.
Samito.
I would never
I
have
told
peace
you.
of mind if you remained there.
All right, you're
He
right.
wanted the money
God.
to dig Floyd up and get him out of that cave. A couple of months later, he had it. All right, so back to Floyd. April 17th, 1925. 7 miners showed up to the scene. They began to dig. Within a week, they had arrived at Floyd. And this time, they approached from the other side of the rock formation. That way, they could remove the rock pinning Floyd's leg.
Excuse me.
They lifted him up from his tomb and laid him down
Couldn't have
on the
done that
fresh
before?
air above. April 26th,
No.
1925. Floyd
Why?
was set to rest in the family cemetery. A stalagmite had been set as a headstone to mark out his plot. And there he lay. No, that's not actually where it ends. Okay, this is where it gets weird. 2 years later,
Lay it on me.
1927. Times have been tough for the Collins. So Floyd's dad sold Sand Cave to a dentist named Dr. Harry B. Thomas
Do you mind?
for $10,000. Now, Homer begged him not to, because at the time, the government was starting to buy up tons of land in the area and turn it into national parks. They had to pay at a very competitive rate. But Lee was becoming a bit old and senile by this point, and frankly, it's doubtful that he cared about Homer or Floyd or anyone else for that matter. It's 100 years later, he's dead now. Let's call it even. So, the point is, in this land sale with Thomas, Lee agreed to a very odd clause. And that clause said, everything on that property belongs to Thomas. And should he wish, for example, to exhume a dead body and re-embalm it and put it on display in something really tacky like a glass coffin inside a cave, maybe, then that would be his prerogative. Lee signed yes.
Come on, man.
And Thomas did exactly that. Doyle made Floyd's corpse a tourist attraction. That's right. 2 bits of gander, come and wonder at the incredible dead man who died in a cave. But to add insult to injury, it worked. Visitors returned
Yeah,
to
of
Sand
course it
Cave
worked.
to
People ain't got
gawk
nothing better to
morbidly
do.
at Floyd. Within a few months, Thomas had turned Lee's failing farm into a successful business. And the rest of Colin's family is horrified.
Of course they
They tried a
were.
number of times to get Floyd returned to them, including through the legal system. But somehow,
He signed it.
incredibly, the judge ruled in Thomas's favor.
Of course he would. He signed the contract.
Why are you getting so agitated, man? What's wrong?
Because I'm like, literally, they obviously I understand that Floyd's brother tried, but I feel like he probably didn't try enough. Because unless they didn't read the fine print, like what else did they expect him like he was gonna do? What did they just think he was gonna buy the farm for this? What did they think he wanted a dentist wanted to become a farmer or something? Of course, his goal was to be able to use the corpse. Yeah, they were struggling, but that's what I'm saying. He shouldn't have signed the part where it said he can use anything on the land the way he pleases, because he should have known that the corpse was buried there, and that's where he's after.
Yeah, but no one's thinking, oh, yes, no, he's going to use the corpse. You're not thinking that.
I would be.
Yeah, you would.
And so, there he lay for the next 2 years.
I knew he was going to do a salmonella.
The cave was not done with Floyd.
I'm like, just let this cave die.
Until someone hatched a plan. 2 years later, it's midnight. Outside Sam,
body heist.
Footsteps can be heard rustling through the brush. Now, we don't know who these two men are, but we know why they are here. To rob a grave. They sneak inside and clamber over the rocks in the darkness. Reaching Floyd's casket, they undo the latch and throw open the lid. There is his shriveled body. They throw him in a gunny sack and they race off into the night. For 800
How can they pick that body up
yards,
so
they carry
easily?
dear Floyd like a couple
Bro,
of
he's
sweaty
probably
sandals
like
about to
light as hell now. Because obviously he would have been embalmed and he would have shriveled and it would have been like way lighter.
Yeah, maybe, to be fair.
deliver a really terrible Christmas present. Panting, out of breath, knowing that they're going to get caught any minute, they reach the Kentucky Green River hillside. There's no time. With a 1, 2, 3, they launch his body towards the river, and Floyd goes sailing into the air, up, into the starlit beyond,
Into the river.
and landing in a bush.
Oh,
God.
Okay, well, that didn't work.
The two men flee from the scene. Now, the next morning, Thomas notices that the body of Floyd is somewhat missing, and he contacts the authorities. The police come, they dust the castle.
My dead
fingerprints,
body's missing.
And bloodhounds are given Floyd's scent and let loose into the hillside. A few hours later, they manage to find him, a tangled up mess near the river, but this time with a leg missing. That same one that was trapped under the rock. So, despite his protest, it had been amputated. Neither the leg nor the culprits were ever found. And while it would be nice to think that this was some well-intentioned duo that did this out of the kindness of their hearts to free Floyd, it's much more likely that it was an act of vandalism because Floyd was simply too much of a hot tourist attraction.
Oh,
The following day,
I was
Floyd
like,
was
what
cast
was the
back
need?
into the cave, back into his box, and it was covered by a metal lid, surrounded by a metal chain, and locked with a padlock. He was now more trapped than he had ever been. This cave had spun fate once again to make sure that its victim would never leave.
That's crazy.
And so, time passed. Floyd's body would continue to decay. The rot from his body would eventually rot the casket too, and every decade or so, it would need to be replaced. A few years later, he was no longer on display.
Skeleton.
But even then, he remained in that box for many more years.
And what
In
archaeologists dig him
1961,
up?
Floyd's cave was purchased by Mammoth Cave National Park, and it was closed to the public. There would be no more visitors.
Thank
The
God.
entrance itself to Floyd's cave was closed with a steel gate and bolted, then welded shut. But the Collins family never gave up objecting to Colin's body being left in the cave. And here is where the story
I was
ends.
going to say, are they
In
even still alive at this
1989,
point?
At the Collins' request, the National Park Service ventured into Floyd's cave. Continuing on a more than 60-year tradition, a team of people worked over the course of several days to remove him from the cave. They took him out, left the cave, locked it behind them, and laid Floyd to rest at the Mammoth Cave Baptist Church Cemetery. After
was gonna
64
say.
years in
God.
Sand Cave, he is now finally at peace. The end. Thank you to Wendigoon as Floyd,
It just
If
ends
you
it
don't
like
let
that.
me out, I'm going to hire a gang of hitmen to come to your house and kill your family.
Samito as
Okay,
Homer,
well,
The BTS meal McDonald's bag that has
I'm
McDonald's
hungry.
and BTS. Shut the fuck up and eat some BTS, bro.
Ordinary Things as Miller,
Ordinary
I'm
Things, that's
enthusiastic,
his
but
name.
would ultimately duck out the back exit.
Rusty Cage as Gerald,
Oh, well, hello there. Haven't seen y'all in a while. Welcome to my new home.
and Many Kudos as Burden.
Hey, buddy. You right down there?
I can.
You sleepy?
I can. Yeah.
We get your coffee?
Cold
Little cup of
and
Joe? Little cup of Joseph?
I'm starting
Cup of Joseph from a little sleepy guy?
Also, by the way, in case you're confused about the channels, this is how it works now.
Internet
And
story.
do not
What?
forget, World
Wait,
of Tanks used about the
so it has a story mode channel. Maybe we'll check that out next
channels.
time.
This is how it works now. And do not forget.
So
World
do
of
we watch
Tanks, World of
Incognito
Tanks.
mode?
None of
Is
this
that the
would have
one we
Yeah,
happened
watched
that's
the
the one
most?
where we
Floyd
started with.
got
Yeah,
World
we've
of
almost watched
Tanks.
all the videos in that one.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my god, I feel like they just did not want that guy to rest in peace. It was
They really
ridiculous.
didn't. They really didn't. I feel really bad
Freaking
for him.
out,
Even when
right?
he was dead, that he was still. How can you
It's
leave him in the cave?
64 years he was in that cave for.
That's crazy, bro. I
Bro,
hope that's never any of us.
I don't know why it would be, honestly. I don't think I'm even gonna go near a cave no more now.
Neither am
Not that
I.
I did in the first place.
Exactly. But anyways,
I just did stay my ass in the city.
it's been quite a long video. I think we can end it here. It's been very, very interesting. Floyd,
We are
I'm sorry.
glad. We hope you guys enjoyed, and we're glad you guys can join us for these 2
I'm
days
sorry,
of the
Floyd.
videos. If you're one of the ones that started from the first day,
If you're
otherwise, we
not,
hope you guys can join us. We hope you guys have been able to join. We are happy you guys have been able to join us on this journey.
dude, forget it. Forget it. Just forget it. Forget
All
it.
right. Well,
If you're still watching, we appreciate you. If you left early, we still appreciate. Thanks
in
for
a
checking
bit.
in, and see you guys in the next one.